Well, welcome to another episode of Through a Therapist's Eyes. How are you, Craig?
Hey, Chris, I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here.
It's the middle of October here in North Carolina, and we have finally, dare I say, hit fall, and I'm loving it.
It feels good.
Absolutely.
A little chill in the mornings.
It.
Fall is in the air.
Hello, everyone. This is Chris Gazdick and Craig with Through a Therapist's Eyes, the podcast, where we invite you to see the world through the lens of a real mental health and substance abuse therapist. The goal is to create emotional growth through the episode of this podcast. We make sure you understand that it is not a delivery of therapy service of any kind, and we have feedback and discussion, which we've had started to get in, I believe, Craig. Is that right?
We are starting to get some questions trickling in. We're going to have a question and answer show soon, hopefully.
Moment for our sponsoring agency, Metrolina Psychotherapy Associates, located in Belmont. They work with children, adolescents, adults, couples, everybody, I think. Metrolina was founded in 2010, July 1. Working with you to create emotional growth. Check them out, metpsych.com, and phone number 704-461-8253. Craig, I think you've got some new things that we've got going on with your tech ability, right?
Yeah, got a couple things going on I wanted to mention to the audience before we get started on today's show. I'd like for you, if you're listening to the show and enjoying things, I'd like to start getting email addresses. So if you go to our website, throughatherapisteyes.com, enter your name and email address. That will allow us to send you updates about new shows and other things we have going on. So I'd appreciate it if you guys would jump on the mailing list.
You won't be selling tires on there, will you?
No, we're not going to spam you or anything like that or try to sell you anything. Just keep you informed about new shows and what's coming and things like that. So I'm not going to spam anybody. Also, too, I put subscribe buttons on the website, so you can click subscribe on iTunes, and there's a couple other buttons on there to different platforms. So if you, obviously if you're listening to the show, hopefully you're not having trouble. But if you have friends that are having trouble finding us, it's easy to go to the website now and just click right through to the show on the various podcast platforms. And also, too, we were talking about getting questions earlier. One of the things we've discovered is people are leery of asking mental health type questions on social media, or, rightfully so. And so what we've done is added a Contact Us button or a Contact Us link on the website. And you can go there and send emails anonymously. So when you go to that Contact Us link, in the name field, it says John/Jane Doe, and it's got one of our email addresses in the email address field. So if you just leave that blank, it sends us an anonymous email. And Chris won't even know your name or myself if you use that method. And if you do want to get a response from Chris, then you just enter in your name and email address in those fields, and he's able to respond to you directly. So if you have a question and you're concerned about privacy, then click on that Contact Us link on the website, and you can send us things scot-free.
Nice.
Yeah.
Throughatherapisteyes.com, right?
Yep.
So, little warning to the audience. We don't have a group thing today, so we have an hour that we usually go to, and want to explain that we may go over the half hour today, Craig. I hadn't even said that to you yet, but there's a reason for that. I'm not going to worry so much about trying to cap it into 30 minutes and feel pressured with that. Sometimes I do, particularly when we did substance abuse, man. I was halfway through that one. I was like, oh my gosh.
We could talk for hours there, though.
Really, though. So we may run over a little bit of our normal time.
That's cool.
Because this is one that I think is that important to do that on. I'm going to be referring people, and welcome if you're working with me in therapy, to this particular episode, because it is that primary in laying a foundation, I think, for people. And this particular episode is going to be on marriage, but I have really worked it into working individually with people, like a lot, in the way that we see any attachment that we've got going on with people. And so it's we're going to be talking about marriage today. Thought about trying to get a comic skit jumping into this one, by the way, when we're talking about marriage, right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Make jokes and deal with comedy for marriage?
It may help.
Yeah, it may. So the idea here is emotion-focused therapy, and I'm going to talk about a guy named John Gottman.
John Gotti?
No, I actually watched that movie just yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I really did. John Gotti. Man, he was a funny fella.
Yeah.
He's a gangster.
Yeah, about as funny as a hornet nest.
Well, and it was funny too because I'm sitting there watching that show, and the thing is when I was growing up, all that was going on, 1985 and everything.
Yeah.
That
yeah,
was
the Teflon Don.
That was weird, man. I was like, I remember those cars. Oh my gosh, the puffy hairdos
Yeah.
were on the show.
Yeah.
No, not Gotti. Gottman.
John Gottman.
Different guy. And Sue Johnson. Recognize any of these names?
Gottman sounds familiar, but again, I may be confusing that with the other name, John Gotti. But no, Sue Johnson does not sound familiar at all.
Yeah. I think I've said before on this show, I pull from so many things over my work with people, and I can't impress enough that how foundational this has been in changing my work with people in therapy over the last 3 or 4 years that I've come in touch with this work. It's just profoundly significant to the way that we operate in relationship to others.
And it's called EFT.
Emotion-focused therapy.
Emotion-focused therapy.
And that's,
okay.
And that's just really kind of started. I'll give a quick background of where this is coming from so people can look at it on the show notes. I've got Gottman Institute, and I've got drsuejohnson.com. These are foundational people in what we're talking about today.
Okay.
And also the other show note is a neat overview, I guess, of these things on goodtherapy.com. They seem to have good information on goodtherapy.com.
Yeah.
I've never seen it before, but in research and shows, I see that they bring up good descriptions of stuff. It's kind of neat. So let me tell you about John Gottman. Interested?
Yeah, absolutely.
This guy, I didn't even find him, till, like I said, 4 or 5 years ago. But he started his work a little while before that. And in looking at his material and doing some trainings and some things on what he found, he did science to this stuff. Now, not to say that we don't have science behind mental health. We have a lot of science. But a lot of times, particularly people that, like even Sue Johnson with emotion-focused therapy, who she kind of coined that and did a lot of work applying, I feel like his stuff, he really did a lot of this. Well, I guess I should say psychology. The field of psychology has a lot of science behind their stuff. Maybe counseling and therapy and social work and these types of domains really don't as much, but he wired people up. I mean, this guy sat in a room in wherever he started the Gottman Institute, and he just observed thousands upon thousands of couples, and he wired them up with measurements of tear ducts, measurements of heart pressure, measurements of blood pressure, measurements of sweaty palms, and all he did is he said, listen, I just want you to talk to each other. Two couples sitting at a table talking.
So this EFT model, is it specific to marriage?
No, that's what I said. It's
I missed that. I must have missed that.
Yeah, no, it's EFT is something that Sue Johnson took this guy's stuff and kind of created a philosophy of operating with people, and she's kind of spun it into working with people individually with different issues and all. But Gottman kind of created a lot of the knowledge base, I guess I would say, in what it seems like she spun off of from him to do. So in his studies of people, just observing them, healthy couples, disgruntled couples, struggling couples of all sorts, he narrowed it down to 2 very specific fears that people have that drive this model of how relationships work. And that's what we're going to talk about today. These 2 primary fears of how, what's in operation when people are going through very chronic and cyclical patterns in their relationships with spouses. But again, I also say anybody you're kind of attached to. So the basics of this theory, this emotionally focused theory is that when in attachment with somebody, your insecurity is driving the train, basically. And we know how powerful insecurities can be. Basic concept of emotion-focused therapy comes from attachment theory, which basically kind of describes that people are made, a concept that people are made healthier by the emotional contact and the need to feel safe in their connections to others. I'll point out how powerful this stuff is and I may even have mentioned, do you remember me talking about the Russian orphanage in shows past? I don't know if I have or not.
I don't think we've touched on that in the show.
Okay, this shows the power of what it is that we're talking about with the core aspects of attachment theory. There's something called reactive attachment disorder that people have, and it's very difficult emotional sort of rage that comes. And we first started learning about this many years ago, honestly, with a Russian orphanage that, and this is heartbreaking, so bear with me, audience. This is just to show the power of what we're talking about with these strong internal feelings and emotions. They had this orphanage, and these babies were taken care of. They had heat, had blankets. Rows and rows of babies were here, and food, nutrition, heat, clothing, shelter, everything is there for these babies. But because there were so many of them, particularly in this orphanage, they didn't have any human contact. Right? So these babies were there, and no love, really, no attachment figure that holds them and coos at them and that type of thing. Craig, that didn't work. The babies simply died. They just died.
They just
a lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them, yes.
So they had food, water.
Everything. Did not have attachment. And we know that babies have sometimes what's called a failure to thrive, is a phrase we know of. Well, this failure to thrive demonstrates that you need attachment in order to grow and develop, and how powerful it is when that emotional contact isn't there.
Yeah.
Super, super sad.
Yeah. So what was the cause of death?
That's presumed to be a lack of attachment.
Interesting, because I have heard those kind of stories before, but I heard those kids just grew up troubled.
The ones that
evil,
lived.
like not evil, but mean.
You're right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just unstable.
Right.
But I've never heard that they died or there was death involved.
Absolutely. And I don't know the numbers. It'd be interesting to see. I probably should have researched that, but they just died.
Wow.
It's that, and that's just super sad. And the Russian people, they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't realize that was the case. They were providing for the needs of the babies. They were orphans, I guess, and didn't have a home, and so and they just housed them.
Yeah. Did they get to a certain age and then die?
I really don't know
level
much
of details.
More. Yeah, I don't know about that. Would be interesting to kind of know, but
very interesting.
So those are the powerful emotions that we're talking about when we're talking about the attachments we have and the levels of emotion, insecurities that are there. And that was there, here's a really important point, before you met your spouse. Before you even met, these things are at play. Because it's really easy to blame your spouse in a marriage. Man, you make me feel awful. Let the comedy begin here, right?
Yeah, right.
Go, Craig. Put him on spot. Comedy. You blame, and you just, because it's so easy to do. It's so easy to look at the other person. So let me go into what's happening with these patterns that they identified. I found myself in therapy saying this stuff over and over again. So I'm sorry if I'm being long-winded, but it's an important pattern set to look at. So it goes like this. Psych 101, you will remember the system in your brain called fight or flight.
Right.
Fight or flight.
Yeah.
The amygdala, which is, get this, 12 or 15 times faster than your frontal cortex. Okay, that's important because your frontal cortex is a part of your brain that thinks abstractly, pulls fact and fact and fact and fact and pulls it all together to create a decision or a thought. Your amygdala is 15 times faster, if I'm correct on that number.
What is the amygdala?
The amygdala is a part of your brain that interprets threat. Fight or flight gets kicked when your amygdala says there's a bear on the street and it's going to kill me.
Then. Yeah, that makes sense. If you see a bear, you don't need to sit around thinking about what's going to happen. You need to get out of Dodge, right?
Some believe it's the oldest part of our brain. It sits right above the brainstem in the middle of our brain, and there's the hypothalamus and the different brain chemistry pieces that drive our fight or flight system. Okay.
Yep, that makes perfect sense.
So forget about the term fight or flight. What Gottman identified is the two main insecurities that are driving the behaviors, the thoughts, the adrenaline, the cortisone that gets pumped through our body with the fight or flight system. The two main insecurities that you are operating from is, you've well heard of abandonment, right? The other one is engulfment. So what happens is this insecurity gets triggered with the amygdala, and your body kicks into this crazy state that you're either going to be killed or you're going to run for your life. So when this gets triggered, you are then in that state. And when you're in an attachment relationship, what we're saying is you get into a conversation and you get keyword triggered into this state, and you're going to sit there and think you're going to work through an emotional problem with your partner. Now, how do you think that's going to work? I'm going to kill or be killed, but yet we're going to sit here and talk about the bills. Or I'm going to kill or be killed, and we're going to talk about how's best to parent our child right now because he got a bad grade. Sometimes it's really as simple as, because our brain doesn't understand the difference, Craig. I'm either going to kill or be killed with this fight or flight thing through abandonment or engulfment, and figure out how much we're supposed to spend on the groceries like this week. This is how crazy we can get in the moment when our amygdala fires off.
Okay. So we're talking about something that's the oldest part of the brain, that caveman didn't have to worry about paying bills and those kind of things. So as we have evolved and our society has grown, now we're worried about paying bills and parenting kids, and
because our
going to
frontal
baseball
cortex
games,
grew.
but we still have these primitive fight or flight or kill or be killed tendencies that you're talking about.
Very powerful emotional systems are at play.
Okay.
So abandonment is one and engulfment is the other. I call this the razor's edge. At birth or early in childhood, it really doesn't matter why. I haven't been able to figure out why. It could be multiple reasons, and it doesn't matter quite so much because it's happening in today's world. So the razor's edge, you fall on one side or the other. Everybody's on one side or the other.
Either or. There's only two.
And you roll two extremes.
Okay.
And how far you roll on the extreme is where you're at.
Right.
And you try to come to the center, but you roll to that. And everyone has both insecurities, but you're on that razor's edge, I say, at birth or earlier on, whenever it is, because you really don't tend to switch, is what I kind of believe. That's what I believe. It's what I see. I can't say that Gottman would say that. I'd be curious to ask him that question, but you're really primarily, very clearly on one side or the other of abandonment and engulfment.
But you said we have tendencies of both.
Right.
But we're more on one side or the other.
Perfect.
Okay.
Very much more on one side or the other. So abandonment people, we're going to use the word pursuer instead of the other term, Psych 101, fight or flight. Forget that. We're going to pursue with abandonment people or withdraw from engulfment people.
Okay. So if I'm on the side of abandonment, I'm going to pursue.
Correct.
And if I'm on the other side, engulfment,
you're going to withdraw.
I'm going to withdraw.
Now everyone understands what abandonment is. You're going to be alone, left. People aren't going to be there for you. I actually had to look up engulfment because that's a weird word.
Yeah.
Engulfment.
It is. I've heard you say that word before, and it's a weird word.
Engulfment, if you think about it, engulfed by flames, engulfed with fire, or the tsunami comes and engulfs you. It overwhelms you. It comes in and takes over. It's like it's an all powerful controlling force.
Okay.
Engulfed.
Okay. All right. So I'm sure you're going to this, but if I'm an abandonment person, and me and my wife get into a spat about the bills or taking the kids somewhere or whatever the deal, or my partner, how do I react to that if I'm an abandonment person?
Perfect. I'm going to do both right now.
Okay.
Because that's where we're going.
Well, obviously, the next question would be, what does the other one do? Yeah. So good.
The behaviors operate with this pursue pattern or this withdrawal pattern, and it is very cyclical. And this is why people will go around and around and around and around in cycles and wonder, why are we having the same argument over and over and over again over the last 40 years? My gosh, can we not do something different? Well, this is why. Because the abandonment people will pursue. They will try to get emotional safety through getting close. And so they come close to pursue you. I wish people could see my hands with this because I talk with my hands on this is important.
We got to get on YouTube soon.
I know, right? The engulfment people will withdraw because they are trying to gain emotional safety by getting distance.
Okay.
So there's where you get your primary difference and your cyclical, constantly reenacted scenario. I or you get upset, triggered, and we get into this insecure, very powerful emotional state, and we do opposite things. Whoever goes first. If you withdraw, then I'm going to get triggered probably and pursue. If I pursue you, you're going to get emotionally triggered and withdraw. And we just go in that way over and over again.
Okay. So what does that pursuit look like? I mean, and withdrawal. I mean, so what if just describe what that scenario might look like.
Perfect. I want to refer you to the website throughtherapist.com. We're going to figure out a way to get some awesome that I pull out of my shelf all the time. I don't use any of my old handouts, Craig, but I use these ones constantly. I pull them out. You'll hear these behaviors come out off of this page that my good buddy Jeff Shook gave to me. Awesome therapist.
Jeff Shook.
Yeah. He gave this to me, man.
Jeff.
He
Great
gave
guy.
this to me, and it was awesome. I use it constantly.
Yeah.
You'll hear these things come off the page. You're either in set 1 or set 2. Set 1. I can't count on you. You're not there for me. I feel all alone. I fear that you're going to leave me. Seems like what I want isn't important at all to you. Seems like what I need isn't important to you. Okay, set 1. Set 2, I fear that if I get too close, you're going to criticize me. You're going to control me. I feel like I need my space. I'm going to lose myself in this relationship. I feel like you're far more in control of this thing, or you're trying to get more control of this relationship in me. I feel overwhelmed by your needs. I feel overwhelmed by your reactions and all your emotion. You're so emotional. Set 1 and set 2. And as the audience listens to this, what I want you to think about is, which one does your spouse sound like? Which ones do you hear? Which ones do you hear that you say, that you feel? Because generally you're going to fall in one or the other as your primary go-to.
Right. Okay.
And the other thing that's on this is an article that I found on the web that'll further help people identify sort of, because I'm actually surprised. Which side do you think you're on? People struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
The article real quick is going to go out to a lot of more daily behaviors that more further answers your question, and also really is pointedly designed that I use in tandem to help people see which one are my tendencies, which ones do I tend to go on with.
Is it not kind of obvious, though? Shouldn't the person really know?
They really don't.
Really?
What are you hearing in those two?
Well,
set
I mean,
one
it's
and
you know,
set two.
the one person tries to draw close, and that's the abandonment person.
Right.
You know, hey, I want to work this out. Let's talk about this. Let's figure
Right.
this out. And the engulfment person says, hey, I need some space, you know. I need to think about this or whatever.
Think for a long time about
let me
this.
get back to you. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Seems pretty obvious on which end of that spectrum you would be, but maybe not. I mean,
People struggle a lot of times. I can't tell you how many times people say, well, I do both. And we get to really looking at this individually and working through the issues. And
you
you'll find
did say that both people have both tendencies.
you can, particularly with the article that I have on there.
Yeah.
You'll see some on both sides of it, but you're going to see a lot more checks on the left-hand side, which is abandonment, or on the right-hand side, which is engulfed.
So it's going to be weighted one side to the other.
It's going to be heavily weighted, I would say,
Okay.
if you're really looking at it.
Got it.
Which one do you see yourself as?
Oh, man, you put me on the spot.
I know,
don't you?
right? You said it's easy.
Yeah.
It's obvious.
Well, I'd rather not say.
I'm clearly on the abandonment side of it.
That's probably where I am too.
You know?
Yeah.
It's easy
Yeah.
for me to see this and see some of these behaviors. And the thing is people need to realize that it's totally okay to identify one or the other. Because we all don't want to be abandoned. We all don't want to be controlled by other people.
Right. Yeah, that's true too.
Who wants either one of these? These
Yeah.
are both horrible.
Right.
You know. But you will find that you primarily go to one or the other, and there's no shame in that.
Yeah. So what do you have? Do you speak with couples that are they're both one? They're both one. So you have a man and a wife who are or do opposites indeed attract, and most of the time it's one or the other.
Perfect. In a relationship, you have 3 options. Okay. Man, I wish we had more time because I can give comedy on the on the withdrawal.
We can hang out.
You can have two people. We are going to go over. There's no doubt. We have a withdrawal pattern. And basically both people want distance and want space. Craig, I saw this, as far as I can tell, in my therapy office once.
Really? In
Once.
20 years of practice or more?
Well, since I've been aware of it, I've been very aware of it the last 4-5 years or so, 3-4 years.
Okay.
But in working with this particularly. And it was very different session than I've ever had. Because usually in a couples counseling session, dude, I am struggling to get it to within what managed care makes me try to do in an hour. Because you've got your thoughts, they've got their thoughts, and they got their story, and you got your story, and I'm getting a lot of information all at once. Yeah, I should spend 2 hours with an initial therapy session for couples. I've gotten good at getting a lot of information in a quick period of time, but I was done with them in 40 minutes. I was like, that's the whole story. I've got everything.
Wow.
Because they were both just like, not externalizing a lot of information, which is what people do. Very internalized with withdrawal. So you can have abandonment, pursue. What happens there, and I've seen that a few times, it's chaotic. There's a lot going on. I mean, it's a love fest in the beginning of the relationship. Just boom, 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 boom. And then, but, it's when things aren't going well, it's crash, crash, crash. There's just so much going on together.
Oh, wow.
I would probably need 3 hours to do a full assessment.
Yeah. So this is abandonment. Two abandonment people.
An overwhelming majority of the time, it really is one person is in the engulfment role who withdraws, and the other person is in the abandonment role, and they pursue.
Is it more women abandonment, women engulfment, or does it kind of evenly distributed, or how does that whole gender dynamic work?
People are going to think we lead each other with this because you're perfectly leading exactly the way I want to go with these things. You're awesome. Great minds think alike.
That's true.
Because it is, dramatic pause, not gender-oriented at all.
Wow.
At all. And that's something that damns people into being stuck into what you would think of as being gender roles. And I use that word purposely because I want to make that strong point. Like, you're supposed to be, as a woman, all emotional and all engaging and supportive and validating and hallmarky and bring me flowers and roses and, let's have a date and candles, right? There are so many women that I talk to that are operating from an engulfment perspective that they say, like, oh my God, the flowers die. What the hell? A waste of money.
Yeah.
We don't need to do all that. What are you talking about? And they withdraw and they want their she cave. You ever hear of a she cave?
I have
not
heard of that.
I saw a commercial with a she cave.
Really?
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
They want their space. They want to go away. It's not a gender thing. And then you're the guy, right? Dude, the situation I just described, I would love candles and Hallmark cards. My wife makes fun of me for cards. I love cards. Buy me some flowers. Can I say that as a dude? Give me some flowers. That'd be great. He can't look at me right now.
Well, I was thinking about something else, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. I mean, the thing is, men are supposed to be engulfed. Women are supposed to be, abandoned.
That's what you would think society would tell us.
Women are supposed to be
Men
pursuers.
Are all tough. Yeah, and
Men are supposed to be withdrawers.
Right.
It just does not work that way at all, is what I see in my office.
Interesting.
At all.
Wow. So it could be either or.
Absolutely. There is not a gender component here. It is an insecurity-based fear that drives our behavior and pulls us into these patterns of pursuing a closeness or withdrawing into the cave. It ain't a man cave, for distance and space.
Yeah. So if it's not, weighted by gender, what do you think makes people one or the other? Is it our upbringings, how we're, how we're raised, or what goes on in our experiences growing up? How do we become one or the other?
Totally trying to work that out with people, and I have not found anything that derives any kind of, I don't know.
Huh.
I have no idea.
Interesting.
I can talk about it, say, parents, your family, gender norms, but that doesn't, we just talk about it. I mean, life experiences, you were abandoned. Listen, there is a family that can have 5 kids and their dad or mom dramatically leaves the family and abandons the home, and you're stuck with poverty, you would think abandonment would be what you are going to struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be a pursuer, and you're going to be in abandonment insecurity. It's not the case. It's just not the case. Equally right, or not right, equally chance is what I meant to say. One of those kids will be engulfed and the other one will be abandoned. I don't know. I can't figure that out. It doesn't matter.
Maybe it's just the way human beings interpret events in their lives. Like, the scenario you just said, perhaps one child is an abandonment person because they need to feel that love and acceptance from somebody because they didn't get it from their parent. And the sibling or the brother or sister who's engulfment is like, well, hey, my mother left. I need to take care of myself. And
there might be
they withdraw. Maybe that's what.
There might be biological wiring that goes on. There might be social, emotional experiences. People are introverted and extroverted. But listen, those things that we understand about personality inventories, about gender norms, things like introverted, extroverted, and whatever. With this stuff, I throw it out the window.
Yeah,
that stuff doesn't matter. You can be extroverted and be introvert, or extroverted and be pursuer or withdrawer. You can be introverted and be pursuer or withdrawer because it's the insecurity that you're primarily operating from.
Right. Tony Robbins tells a story, and I'm not sure if this is a true story or if one he uses as an example, but he didn't say it wasn't true. And so there's these two twins, and one of them's very successful. He's got a family, a beautiful family with children. He's very successful in his business. The other twin's in prison. And these are identical twins, so they share the same DNA and everything like that. The other brother's in prison. He's been in and out of prison with drug problems and that kind of stuff. And so he interviews these guys separately, and he says, you're very successful, and you have a beautiful family, and things have gone good for you in your life. And he says, what drove you to be this person that you are? And he says, well, my father was a mean alcoholic, and he used to come home every night and beat my mother and my brother and myself. He said, well, I had to get out of there. I had to go do something with myself and get out of that life and make a better life for myself. He said,
right.
What choice did I really have? I had to do something. And so he goes to the prison, and he asks the other brother the same question. He's like, hey, you ended up here in prison. You've been drugs and that kind of thing have ravaged your life. He says, what happened to you? And the guy says, well, my father was a raging alcoholic, and he used to come home at night and beat my mother and my brother and myself. He said, what choice did I have? And, I had no choice but to end up this way. So it was the way those two guys interpreted those events that really drove their behaviors later on in life. And so perhaps that's got something to do with what we're talking about here.
I think it definitely does, but I don't know that we can deduce why somebody's going to take one slant or the other. And it also would lead one to believe that you can also then switch sides. And I just haven't seen people being able to switch sides very easily.
Yeah, and I think, the way I look at things like that is I think that life kind of programs us in a certain way. So if we do take those events and become an abandonment person or engulfment person, it's not that easy to change, because that's, life, if you will, has programmed you to be that way
over years and years and years.
Over years and years and years, and it's not that easy to change. You can't just make a quick switch.
Right. And a lot of therapy is reprogramming and re-understanding your story and kind of really looking at things from a different lens and a different perspective. I'm working that out in my brain, Craig, because I have not been able to come to a lot of conclusion in my mind's eye what drives people on one side or the other. And I've worked so hard, literally over a 2-year therapy relationship with people sometimes, to really alter your perspective from one of these two sides.
Yeah.
And it is, my goal is to help somebody centralize. Come to the center and move a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of it as a scale, whatever side. Let's look at, 1 to 9 is going to be pursue people, and 11 to 20 is going to be withdrawn people. 20 is a bad withdrawer, and 1 is a bad abandonment person. If you're a 2, you're probably going to match up with an 8, or what would that be, 18. Did I do that right? If you're a 15, you're probably going to match up with a 5.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know. There's a range a little bit. So it's important for a couple then, it would think, because if one really dramatically begins to get healthier and go towards what's the center 10, and they move 3 digits, if you will, and the other one moves even further away, well, that ain't going to work really well. So we try to help the couple move together to come to the center. But to get to the other side, oh man, I don't.
What kind of things do you do? I mean, if I'm abandonment and my my mate is engulfment, how do we move toward that center?
That's what we work at a lot, and that's where really I want to refer you to working with a professional, because you need emotional assistance to get out of this, remember, horrifying fight to kill or run to survive type feeling. And everybody knows when you're in a really bad spot in your relationship, Craig, it is so painful. I believe it to be the most dangerous and painful time that you can be in with your mental health.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Going through a divorce or separation, or really going through an affair. I mean, these are painful, painful, painful times. Even in a high schooler's mind's eye, when he's going through a breakup, heartache, heart pain, heartaches, a broken heart hurts bad. Yeah. People get suicidal.
Yeah.
Kids have completed suicidal acts. Kids. We're not talking about a 30-year marriage. What happens when that gets to that point? It is so painful when you get into these spots. So what do? You work with other people to manage these emotions that are deep and hard and hurtful. And it takes a lot of pain to get through it. But you trusted friend, priest, spouse, spousal difficulties, you rely on professionals, you get with people. Because here's a point that I'm glad we're getting to make. We're talking about this intellectually, right?
Yeah.
Our frontal cortexes are hearing this information and seeing these patterns that we're in. We're trying to figure out, well, which side am I on? What's my tendencies? These are all thoughts. I'm going to make a real bold statement about myself. People that know me will laugh. You would think that I would have intellect about this, and I think I do, really. I've been studying it and working with people. How do you think I deal with this personally? When it switches from the frontal cortex into the amygdala and the hypothalamus, and the emotional level starts kicking in, man, you're,
Yeah. I don't know if we've talked about it specifically on the show, but you and I have had these conversations before, and a lot of the things we talk about, like mindfulness and catching, watching the breath and being present and that kind of stuff, goes out the window, dude, when you got emotions in play.
It's
firing. It is hard to bring yourself off the ledge.
It is scary.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. Whatever perspective you're coming at, you are engulfed. You are controlled. You are losing yourself. You are going to be destroyed by this thing, this person. You are going to be abandoned, taken, marooned on an island for dead, alone. You're not. You're abandoned. I mean, these are scary, not logical, but scary emotional experiences that people are going through. And when you're triggered, boom, you're in it, and you're in it hard.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you go into a insecure space or your spouse goes into an insecure space. When you or the other does, typically the other one's going to follow.
Yeah.
Because you play off each other, you play off each other. And
right.
This is why it goes. So it's an internal process with all those things and many more that we'll be talking about. Now we're on to emotion management. And here's the big thing. If you are thinking that the other person, external, or other situations, external, are going to change and make you feel better, you're sadly confused. That won't work. You have to get internal with yourself. It's your responsibility to calm yourself down, bring yourself back to space, and manage that internally. But we often pick and fight and boom and blast. And Gottman talks about the 4 horsemen. You'll get defensive a lot of times with engulfment, but we do it too in pursue. you'll get critical and snap at the other person, right? And he talks about a couple others. The four horsemen are very, very. You're trying to survive. I mean, there's survival mechanisms when you're into these triggered states, and it's not intellectual. So again, we go back, right? You get into this scary triggered state, and you're going to sit down and try to have good communication skills with your spouse. Listen, this has dramatically changed the way that I work with people. You know what I used to do in therapy with couples?
What's that?
I would pull out my whiteboard, and I'd actually sit there and talk about active listening. And I'd draw out and talk about
It's not a bad thing, though.
No.
Active listening is a good thing.
It's all of these things are going to be, because I'm going to quote some material that people get into.
Yeah.
Love languages. You ever hear that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's good
You're talking
stuff.
about giving cards and stuff a little bit ago. And gifts is somebody's language. They're going to love
I
that.
don't understand the gift giving language. I don't. But the 5 love languages, we talk about. Yeah, and I would in therapy, I'd talk about the way that we're wired, and I'd pull out personal inventories.
That's a great book, by the way. If you're listening,
Fantastic.
I'm going to put that in the show notes too. It's a great book, The 5 Love Languages.
And you probably want to put in there the Love Dares, another really good
that's
work.
a good one too.
But here's the thing, man, Craig, all of these things I would do for benefit of communication in marriage counseling, and I was missing the point. I like to say when I'm making these points with people, you come into counseling and you want to improve your communication skills, and I'll tell people, I don't think you have a communication problem. And they look at me with funny looking eyes. I get a kick out of it. And I'll follow that up and say, because you have communicated about all sorts of things with close relationships that you have attachments with. You've planned a wedding. You've talked about, complicated finances. You bought a house. You worked out problems. I mean, complicated things you have communicated about. But when you get into one of these triggered states, Craig, whether you're an engulfment-based withdrawer or you're an abandonment-based pursuer, you can't talk about whether you're going to go get Pepsi or Coke, because you basically lose your mind.
Yeah.
Some lady talks about when you get into this triggered state. I saw her in a training when I was at. Your frontal cortex goes offline. And she had a phrase, and I forget. Oh, man, what was that phrase? Scared brain. Lost brain, scared body, I think is what she said. You lose your frontal cortex. You're no longer logically thinking through anything, and you're operating emotionally.
Yeah. So, Chris, if we keep talking about bringing yourself out of these emotional states, and these emotional states seem to be driving a lot of the issues, like our episode on technology anxiety, and so is it if you get yourself all worked up, if the amygdala kicks in,
right?
What do you do? Is it some of the things with the breath work and bringing yourself down? Is that
all of that?
But you have to be aware.
We work out in marriage counseling with people that now you get to strategies. Let's take a break. For the engulfment people, take a break does not mean a month or a week. It might be an hour or a day, or maybe on big issues, let's table this till we can get together again 3 days later.
Yeah.
But pursuing people were like, no, we got to talk about this now. Or a break for them is like, okay, I'll go get a drink in 5 minutes and we'll be back. We have, let's go, right? So you develop a lot of strategies to manage the intensity that goes on. Writing things out is a great way to deflect of the intense emotion, because you're going to write it and review it.
You buy a journal and.
Well, no, I'm saying you sit down. I used to and still kind of do. Use a conflict tool. You write out what the problem is. Well, you write out the events. You write out what the problem. You write out what the solution is, and you spend time talking about the solution. You can even measure it out
together.
With time. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's lots of strategies, and I can talk about communication in therapy with people, but again, it all misses the point if you're not understanding the insecurity-based power. All of that stuff gets blown out the window. I can develop and have developed great individualized strategies with people, and they come back like it didn't work. Well, now for the last 3-4 years of my career, I kind of understand why.
Yeah. Okay. So when you say you're missing the point, what you're saying now is this EFT with abandonment and engulfment is the backbone. That's the point.
That's the point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I feel like I was a good enough average marital counselor before when I was doing what I was doing, because, Craig, I figured out a long time ago, really, that we want to look at what patterns are in place, and I would always say that. What patterns do you have? Do we want to keep them, change them, lose them altogether? And that's why we'd look at what communication patterns you have. So I was really kind of in the right zone with that. But then I would go to all those things to look at what patterns you have with your love languages and your this and that's and personality makeups and personality inventories. But when I say missing the point, it doesn't hit at the exact pattern that you have with this pursue, withdraw, as you say, backbone. We got to get that backbone crystal clear in your intellect. Understand that your intellect is only going to go so far because your emotion takes over. Then we can add a lot of strategies and things in place if you're managing it internally.
Okay, so you're saying like what we're talking about here with abandonment engulfment is like the foundation.
Yes.
So you get the foundation laid, and then perhaps the love languages and the love dare, those are strategies or
now
building
all that
blocks
stuff
that you're laying on that
sense.
foundation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all that stuff now is going to make sense. All that stuff now is going to be effective. And it's great stuff.
Yeah.
I do still pull up my whiteboard in the office. A little shout out to Jeff Shook. He loves his whiteboard. I use mine too.
I hope he's listening.
I know, right? He's a certain mentor of mine over the years. I have a lot of respect for him, and he's an excellent marriage family counselor. And I think that's why he gave me this handout. I don't know if he created it or not. He didn't put his name on it, but he gave it to me, and I use it all the time because it's so powerful.
Right. So
powerful. So I hope we've done a good job. We definitely went over. We're at about 40 plus minutes, and this might be our number one listen to podcast, man, because I mean for the rest of my career I hope I've done a good job. I would listen to it back. We might have to re-record this technology anxiety many times over because it's got to be right, man. This one's got to be right. Because it is so foundational in what I'm going to be doing with people that now I don't maybe have to say the same thing over and over again. And then we can apply specifics to your marriage. Because marriage, it could be said as a backbone of society. And it's struggling, Craig. You were going to look up.
Yeah, I found some statistics. 40 to 50% estimates of divorce. Yeah,
it's bad. First marriages, I've heard as much as 60% or 50% in years past. If you saw 40, it's better.
I saw 40 to 50.
Did you really?
No, 40 to 50 is what it said. Somewhere between 40 and 50%.
That's ticked down.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's a shame, I
but you get into a second
thing.
marriage, it's just exponentially higher, like 65, 70%. Third marriage, forget it. It's like 80%.
Yeah,
it's bad.
Yeah.
And that's because you continue with the same patterns over and over again because your emotion takes over, and we're going to work on changing those patterns with people. And that gets me really excited to work with people in dealing with these attachment issues and changing patterns so that you can actually get to what I look for with the golden egg, and we'll wrap up with this idea. Really, the goal is getting to that soft, safe space between you and your spouse. You've had it, you know when it's there. It's why you got together. That soft, emotionally safe space where you feel like you can say anything that you need to say to your partner. Now, that's a tough standard. You can say anything that's on your mind, anything that's in your heart to your spouse. That's what we're trying to strive to get as close to as possible.
That's the way it should be, right? I mean,
well, it's not possible. Be willing to make that statement.
Okay.
Some people will say they can do that. I don't know about you.
Maybe that's a new show.
100% of my thoughts, 100% of my feelings, to think that God can see and knows all those things is scary on the best moment of my best day.
True.
Okay? So as close to that as we can get is what we're really trying to strive for. And understand it's really, really hard. Another quick point. It seems easier. Your insecurities aren't that bad when you're starting to date, folks. That's why they say it's all different after you say I do. Well, it's because now you got more skin in the game. The person you love the most, the person you're closest the most to, is actually where you can feel the most insecurity. And that's something people miss and misunderstand. Person you love the most can hurt you the most, but they're not hurting you. Listen, your spouse isn't abandoning you even though you have abandonment fear. They're not going to do that. They have no intention of doing that. remind myself when next time I'm all triggered, right? Your spouse is not trying to overwhelm you and control you. The last thing somebody wants to do is control another person, you know? But engulfment fear is, you feel it. Abandonment fear, you feel it. So yeah, we'll bring these things up again, but like I said, I hope we've laid a good foundation that we can really refer back to this episode, classic episode 11. We may have to record this one again, Craig. Can you handle that?
I can handle it.
Over and over again till we get it exactly right.
I think we did a pretty good job, but yeah, I can handle it if we have to do that.
I hope so. Let's take us out of here. What are we doing?
Yes. What are we doing? That's a good question.
Next, we talked about your idea. I think you brought it up. Why don't you guide us to where we're going next show? Yeah,
we got a couple of different ideas on the table. Chris and I do. We have some guests we're working on. Hopefully, you guys have enjoyed the guests we've had so far. We got a question and answer show coming up. We're starting to get some questions in. We'd like to have some more. So if you guys out there have more questions, we would love to hear them. We'll answer them here on the air. And again, keep all your information confidential. We're thinking about doing a recap now that we're about 10 episodes, or 10 true episodes. We got the intro too, but really 10 good episodes in. We've kind of established some patterns of where we see the show going and things that we're doing. So we're looking at having a little recap show. And we may do that next week. May do that next time.
I think so. Yeah, it'll be fun to recap these things.
Yeah. And, if you're a first-time listener, welcome, and we really appreciate you joining us. And if you're a repeat listener, then we'd like to thank you, too. And please tell your friends if you're finding value in the show.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to point out, Craig, it's kind of cool and been exciting to work with you on this. We really are starting to see some numbers roll in and some interesting things. I'm going to say, I'm not going to point out the country, but we have actually listeners in other countries, and that's very humbling to me.
Yeah, that's pretty cool
stuff.
That's
pretty cool, you know?
Yeah. That is really interesting.
This is a growing show, and I hope you're really enjoying it. We're really enjoying doing it. I say those on the little posts that I do to introduce the topic, and we really are. We're enjoying it a lot.
We're having a lot of fun, and if you want to find out more information about Chris and myself and the show, then you can find us at throughatherapisteyes.com. Again, there's an email list out there. I'd love for you to sign up so we can keep in touch. Also, too, if you are listening, we'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. That'll help us get found when people search for topics related to our show. And you can also find links to our Facebook and Instagram on the website. So we'd appreciate it if you guys would follow us that way, too.
Hopefully people that are just listening to maybe with an intention of one show will hear us all the way to the very end, because I'll make the point, we don't usually go this long. It's a lot quicker usually.
Yeah, we're usually about 30 minutes. Today we've gone about 52. If we have a guest, we sometimes go longer too, but we normally keep it around 30 minutes, and we don't want to take up too much of your valuable time.
Been fun, Craig.
Been fun. Thanks, Chris, and we'll talk to you guys next week.